Hello, and welcome to Greet the Week. Have you ever bitten off more than you can chew? Have you ever, well, that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about making a mountain, or maybe you're experiencing a mountain, making it into a molehill. Begin to shrink it down a little bit. And this is part two. And so I just have a few things to think about on that. So I'm going to share the screen. And here is the making sense of it and the so which is easier? Is it easier to change an organism or the environment? Now, that organism could be me and you. It could be the cats or the dogs, it could be whatever. So, is it easier to change that organism or is it easier to change the environment? And what does it mean by easier? Uh, to make things a little more smooth for us, as we can learn to be, no matter what the situation is, learn to be calm and relaxed and unstressed, to be comfortable and straightforward, but more than anything else, to be internally motivated, to go with our internal knowing system as opposed to just what's going on in the wild blue yonder. And then in finding peace and contentment, admit the two circumstances of life, which happens to be those that I may have the possibility of having some kind of an influence on so that they would want to begin to change. And then those that are just, everything's que sera, sera. So we'll keep it on as it is. So here are some thoughts on how to make that mountain into a molehill. One is to adjust your vision. So the problem is not always the problem. The problem has a tendency to be our perception of the problem. And so as we can begin to look at it, maybe blink our eyes and look at it in a different way, because we act on the way we think things are, not necessarily the way that they really are. So as we can see the problem as a challenge that we can learn from, and in the process become friendlier and more competent and more effective. It's also looking at the fact of choosing our attitude. Again, the problem is not necessarily the problem as much as it is the perception, but then also maybe the problem is because of the attitude either that we are producing or the attitude that others are producing. So we want to look at difficult people and not see it. Well, first of all, not be one ourselves. And then secondly, of not seeing the others as being obstinate or as being difficult to get along with. Matter of fact, we could use that as a motivator to help us to be kind, because most things beget themselves, and kindness definitely does beget kindness, or having a lower tone of voice begets having a lower tone of voice. So choosing your attitude. Then also breaking those issues into manageable increments to begin to see, is it how much the time's going to take? Is it finances? Is it just a cleanup job? What is the thing that needs to be looked at and how can it be solved? And then always learning to respond to a situation rather than reacting to the situation. Take the critique. If someone critiques you or they're critical in some way, take it seriously, but not personally. Do not allow that assessment to cause you to be emotions driven, to keep your strength and your limitations, to set some healthy boundaries, limits, or conditions. And always to use fairness, not only toward yourself, but toward the other person. And do not accuse or excuse, but answer the critiquing. And then diffusing the issue, to emphasize, learning to distinguish between what we are feeling and what we are thinking. Sometimes those things can get mixed up and cause more problems. determine the attitude that we're projecting in the time of conflict. Is it one of being hostile or is it one of being kind? And you know what? I think this can be solved. And you don't want to argue or debate. You want to simply make comments and make suggestions or additional comments. And then your position is not necessarily relative to everyone that's listening. So I had titled this spilled milk, and I was really going to start off with two situations, one that I read about and one that really happened to me. And that was when my daughter was, I think she was 7 or 8 years old. I'm not sure exactly when, that she had wanted us to have an ice cream supper for the whole community, which wasn't that as large as it is now at that particular time. And so I agreed to it, and we were making the ice cream. But this was several years ago, and we were put it in a big pot and in the refrigerator. And ever so often, I'd go in and I would stir it up so that it would, all blend together and everything. And I had told her that about every 30 minutes we'll stir it before we can eventually put it into the thing to grind it up and to make it. And so I was working away back in the office and I heard this loud kaboom. And I went into the kitchen and she had taken the ice cream out of the freezer and it was way too heavy for her. And it fell down flat on the floor with such a force that it was like a volcano going off, that it literally sent that milk and sugar and all that stuff to the ceiling. And when I walked in the kitchen, there my daughter was, and she was just drenched, and it was dripping down from the kitchen from the. And I'm thinking, oh no, no, no! What did you do? What is this? But I don't want to, immediately come in and make all kinds of accusations. So what I did was, well, we need to clean this up, and we'll start with you. So I went in and turned the bath water on and told her to get her stuff together and get cleaned up. In the meantime, I had time to really think about it, And that's part of responding rather than reacting, is to stop and to think about something before you actually begin to vocalize it and to verbalize it. Because she wasn't deliberately being mean or not being obedient. She knew that I was working on a segment that needed to be in the mail soon because I was running into a deadline. And she was trying to help me. And so if we can begin to really diffuse the issue by saying what's the real issue here, and it may be, it may be really, really negative. It may be really bad. It may be that diffusing that issue to not make it all about someone in particular, something in particular, but to begin to look at something else. And then also what I read about was in one of the chicken soup books was about a man that talked about his mom, and he credited her with his sense of organization and well, just with everything. But the one incident that he brought out in particular was the fact that he was helping her carry the groceries in, and what he was carrying was a gallon of milk, and he was holding on to it, but he tried to put it up on the cabinet, and when he did, he dropped it, and it went all over the floor. And the mother turned around and looked at it, and the milk was broken. I don't know if it was glass then or if it was plastic that exploded. But she turned around and she looked at the mess, and she looked at him and she says, "Oh my, what a wonderful mess you have made." And rather than accusing him of the mess he made, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, she said, "Now let's clean it up." And they cleaned it up. And then once they cleaned the situation up, she took another gallon and filled it with water and helped him to learn how to hold it and how to handle it so that it would not, well, just how to handle it. So another thing, yesterday morning was Sunday morning on television, and we watch it on Sunday afternoon. That in the program, the moderator was interviewing Michael J. Fox, and he was talking about the fact with all of his physical problems and everything. And he kept saying over and over that gratefulness and optimism is sustainable. And so I can see that that kind of goes hand in hand with whether it's spilled milk or whether it's any difficult situation in our life, that the more we can handle it with gratefulness and optimism, the more sustainable the relating will be, as well as fixing the issue and fixing the problem. And so, in looking at not only that the perception, but also the personality, sometimes we are difficult because we have a little thing with the personality, or someone has a little thing with our personality. And so it's discovering the doorway to communication, that it's our attitude and our behavior that can literally open a door for someone else's input or close a door for someone else's input. And that closing can be either, a little bit or just slamming it shut. But if someone behaves according to your speculations or your expectations, you have a tendency to open the door more and to be more understandable of it. But if the person interacting is against our thoughts or thinking or emotions or the way we would do it, then it may be more that closing off. And so when we recognize another person's behavior style, we can adjust our style, to which then can be more open and more communication and more of a win-win, especially in relationship building. And also to always choose our words carefully, to realize that all words are powerful, they have power, and we want to weigh them, we want to measure them, we want to gauge them to see if they are worth using or maybe be held for another time. To say less and avoid that victim deafness. Sometimes we just won't say anything, even though we may have a good suggestion. Information is also powerful, not only the words we use, but the information that we share. So it's okay. Do ask, do tell, do be truthful, do make suggestions. But whatever, it's always, and admit mistakes as needful. Be flexible. It is easier to change. It is easier to fix things a lot of times than it is to be flexible over what caused the issue. And then always in discussing it, it's use I statement rather than you, or they. It's, this is the way I see it. This is what I'm thinking. This is what I see as would be a correction to the problem. And realizing the old statement that everything comes to pass, but nothing comes to stay. So no matter what the problem is, there is an end to it. There is, things will change. The sun will come out tomorrow, and it is always something to be cognizant of. So are we wanting to beat the situation, or are we wanting to best the situation? And that depends a whole lot on our attitudes. So we always want to choose our battles. It takes two to argue. It takes two to keep things going on. It takes two to build up the strife. So you do not have to acknowledge or make a statement to something that someone says. We can overlook as much behavior as possible, as much negative behavior as possible, and while acknowledging the positives. And then developing compassion, to remember a time when, I would have been so thankful if someone had compassion toward me. So then in turn, choose to give compassion and some understanding to another. And then being a team player. The Reader's Digest, the Family Word Finder, had the definition, the original, the Old English meaning of team, T-E-A-M, and T-E-E-M, both meant offspring. But a team is a number of related animals, as in horses or oxen pulling the cart, as animals or people that are working or playing together. And team means to be full to overflowing, as with our coworkers, as with the people in our home, as in our neighborhood, as in those that we work with. So just a few little closing thoughts here. There are two types of circumstances in life. There are those circumstances that I may have some influence to help some changes. And then there are those circumstances that I cannot change. And to always, always know that for every problem under the sun, there is an answer or there is none. But we can keep on looking at the steps and how to adjust our vision, choose our attitude. There's so many things that we can do. And so I thank you for being here and looking at how we can take those mountains and begin to shrink them down in our sight so that they're more manageable. So thanks for being here and many blessings.